Donations for animals that have been abused or are living in terrible conditions. Multiply that by 10.
A horrible story of abuse and abandonment. Investigators say 3 kids were living in a condo on Lydia Lane in Pontiac for years, alone in horrific conditions.
There was garbage, trash piled 3 and 4 feet high, covered with feces all through the house. It doesn't look like the toilet or the bathtub had been usable or workable for quite some time, primarily because of the feces and trash.
Tell me, is it facts or opinions? You be the judge.
You'll have to decide. You'll have to decide. You'll have to decide.
Yo, welcome to another Is It Facts or Is It Opinion? Everybody's got a fact and everybody's got an opinion. Man, make sure y'all hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. I got one for y'all, man, coming out of Oakland County in Pontiac, Michigan. A 34-year-old mother by the name of Kelly Bryant. Now, Kelly Bryant is being charged right now with the highest statute of basically child neglect that there can be. She's right now is up for a $250 million bond. And because she, I guess allegedly for the last 4 years, she had a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 15-year-old. Well, they just started living at this house. She just left them abandoned in this, I guess, this condo or whatever, but left the 3 kids abandoned to the point where the kids never went to school, never went outside. I guess the family or somebody used to just drop off plates. I mean, the inside of this place was, I mean, like they even said, even an animal shouldn't be living there. To the point they had no hygiene. They had nothing in this house. No running water from the feces. I mean, I want y'all to watch this and then also watch the fact that the mother is pleading not guilty as well. So y'all check this out and y'all tell me what you think.
Well, the pictures are hard to look at. Police in Pontiac say 3 children were found living alone in deplorable conditions after discovering their mother had abandoned them for years. Our Victor Williams is following the story for us tonight. Victor, we're learning that mother has been arrested. What else can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right. The mother has been arrested, Pam, but we're told that these kids were actually inside of this house for years, at least since 2021. This is the house behind me that has that orange sticker right there on the window, but we're told these kids were only 12, 13, and 15. Now, authorities, they said that the mom would drop off food from time to time, but she's a 34-year-old woman that's now being held at the Oakland County Jail with a case now being turned over to the prosecutor for review. We are expecting charges to come in the next few days or so, but the only reason authorities ever stepped in the first place was because the landlord actually called 911. He contacted deputies after not hearing from the mother since about December, and that's what started this welfare check. Take a look at some of this video from inside of the place. We're told that the house was just so unsanitary that evidence techs, they had to wear hazmat suits in order to investigate. Now, we're talking about piles of garbage in rooms as high as 4 feet tall, human feces overflowing in the toilet, and then also the bathtubs. Apparently they were living on that food that people would bring nearby. Even also strangers would sometimes bring that food up to the door. Now, also we are being told that the mother had not spoken to the 2 girls that were in there for years, but she would go and actually speak to the son from time to time. The kids were not in school. They actually spent their entire time at the home watching TV and then playing video games. The conditions in the house were so bad that the kids had to sleep on the floor, the boy had a mattress, and the girls had to sleep on pizza boxes. So we're actually going to go and hear from Sheriff Michael Bouchard on what these kids are now having to go through, as well as what they now have to bounce back from.
Our first focus is in trying to make sure these kids get what they need to begin the process of moving forward. The second very important part of this is how did 3 kids fall through the cracks so terribly? How did the community relatives, the schools, no one knew to reach out to us. How did that happen? And so that's going to be a big part of what I've already directed our investigations to figure out.
Now, while all of this was going on inside of the house, we're told that they ended up finding the mother at a different location. And so we're going to have more on what residents living nearby they have to say about this. That's coming up at 11 p.m. Victor Williams, Local 4.
Hard to imagine. Thank you, Vic.
Feet high, mold, human waste, the toilet overflowing, the bathtub filled with feces. 3 children living alone in these deplorable conditions since 2021. According to authorities, their mother had abandoned them. Prepared food dropped off once a week on the front porch.
That's horrific. I mean, it really is. It's not just the material neglect and the health neglects, but it's the emotional and psychological abuse that this entails.
The kids were discovered Friday in the Lydia Lane condominium during a welfare check. The landlord called police because he hadn't heard from the mother since December. Pontiac Mayor Tim Greimel telling Fox 2 the landlord is partially at fault because he didn't register the property as a rental property with the city.
And if it had been registered as a rental property, then we would have been doing periodic rental unit inspections of the property every few years.
The children, ages 15, 13, and 12, were treated at an area hospital and are now staying with family in an undisclosed location. Their mother arrested in custody at the Oakland County Jail.
It's just heartbreaking to think that someone would do that to the children.
Linda Kissy and her daughter Jackie joining others, dropping off things at the Oakland County Sheriff's Office for the kids.
I brought toiletries, soap, feminine products, and shampoo and conditioner and lotion.
Things the children didn't have while living in this house of horrors.
We've seen the photos and, you hear about this, and it's hard to comprehend that these kids were abandoned since basically spring of 2020. So what happened today? Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald charging 34-year-old Kelly Bryant, that's the mother, with three counts of first-degree child abuse. That is the most severe that felony can be. So she is facing up to life in prison. And, the investigation is still ongoing because there's so many questions that have still been going, through everyone's minds, right? The number one being why they're still trying to figure that out with their investigation. But, these kids, they are currently under the custody of the Department of Health and Human Services, living with a relative. They are recovering. But when you hear just some of these terrible things these kids went through, no toilet paper, a bathroom that didn't work, too scared to go outside. The only time the little boy went outside was 1, to get the mail, and 2, to touch the grass. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. Take a listen to what Prosecutor McDonald had to say.
This is the worst I've ever seen. And I've stopped saying that because every time I say that, I see something worse. It was unbelievable what they were living with for years. These kids, not to have even basic hygiene tools. And I guess what stands out the most for me is no love. There was nobody there to care for them for between 3 and 4 years. No parent, nobody physically present to let them know that they were safe and they were loved.
And you hear that. Nobody physically present. So you might be wondering, how does that even happen? Well, just from hearing from Sheriff Bouchard and Prosecutor McDonald, the boy had access to a phone. He would text his mom when their food supply was running low. And occasionally she would order things off Instacart or DoorDash. For example, we've heard near the end, before they found these kids, they were getting a loaf of bread sent to them to be spent over, 3 or 4 days to survive. So, just really, really bad conditions. So there's a lot still unfolding in this case. Bryant expected to be arraigned tomorrow morning. Of course, we'll cover that. For now, reporting live in Pontiac, Scott Walchek, Fox 2 News.
And Scott, you just said that the child, the oldest son, had a phone that he would text his mother. Do we know why he didn't call for help or didn't even go to a neighbor and say what they were living in? I mean, did she possibly threaten them if they did say something? Because a lot of people are probably wondering that right now. And where do they go from here?
Yeah, police have said that these kids were living in fear, right? So the mom, it's unknown exactly the exact quote she said or what the threat was, but they were terrified to go outside, right? And even when the police came to the home, they were hiding. The two little girls were in a bathroom. The little boy was hiding somewhere else. So it's just a really sad and messed up case. They're still investigating, right? Because we know that the mom is being charged. They're still investigating family, other types of contacts to see if there could be more charges coming down.
All right. Thanks for that update. It's still just a heartbreaking story. Scott, thank you.
Tonight, we are continuing to cover a case that is stunning Metro Detroit. 3 children rescued from squalid conditions. Their mother now under arrest. Thank you so much for joining us for 7 News Detroit at 11. I'm Whitney Burney. Their mother allegedly abandoning the children in 2020 or 2021, leaving a 15-year-old boy, 13-year-old girl, and a 12-year-old girl, only leaving food once a week. Oakland County Sheriff Michael Bouchard saying, quote, "This situation would be deemed deplorable and intolerable for an animal, and it is utterly unacceptable for 3 children." 7 News Detroit reporter Tierra Braddock spoke to Sheriff Bouchard today, as well as a neighbor reacting to the chilling revelations. We do want to warn you, some of the details of this story are very disturbing.
Just a few days ago, Oakland County Sheriff deputies came to this house behind me to do a welfare check on a woman. But when they got inside, they didn't find her, but they did discover her 3 kids who had been abandoned, living in deplorable conditions.
Everybody's upset about it, like, oh my God, this is right in our neighborhood. How could something like this happen?
Pontiac resident Emma Gross lives a few streets over from the home where the kids were found. The Oakland County Sheriff's Office says the house was covered in piles of trash as high as 4 feet in some rooms. There was even mold and human feces throughout the house.
It's pretty heartbreaking that the kids would have to live under those conditions.
Sheriff Michael Bouchard tells me a 15-year-old boy and his 2 sisters, ages 12 and 13, hadn't been outside the home in years and were surviving off of weekly drop-offs of prepared food.
It kind of reminds me of the commercials you see where animals are living in very deplorable conditions. Well, kind of take that times 10, and that's what the kids were living in for years.
The boy told deputies that his mother abandoned them back in either 2020 or 2021. Deputies were recently called because the landlord of the home asked for them to do a welfare check.
The landlord said he hadn't seen her for some time, and I think, as our detectives mentioned, that hadn't paid her rent going back to October.
The kid's mother was arrested on Friday, and Bouchard says she had been living somewhere else in Pontiac. The kids hadn't been in school since they were abandoned.
Well, that's going to be a very long process to figure this all out, not just how they are, both mentally and physically, but how did this ever happen, to have these kids fall through the cracks on so many levels with relatives, the community, and with schools.
Have you ever seen anything like this before?
I've seen, child neglect and other situations where they're living in bad places, but not to this level and not for this extended duration.
The mother will be facing criminal charges, and in the meantime, her kids are now staying with a relative.
Story tonight, the mother charged in that horrible case of child neglect in a Pontiac isn't going to be leaving the Oakland County lockup anytime soon.
No, and that's because her arraignment today, Kelly Bryant was given a $250 million cash bond. Let's go now to Victor Williams live for us in Pontiac tonight following all this. Victor, it's rare to see a judge set a bond that high in a child abuse case.
Yeah, Ty, it's totally rare that we see a bond amount this high, but we think that the judge definitely proved her point. This is likely something that this defendant may not be able to pay whatsoever.
I'm giving her a $250 million bond. Cash only.
It's going to now take $250 million in cash for 34-year-old Kelly Marie Bryant to get out of jail as she waits to go on trial for the neglect of her 3 children she allegedly left on their own for years.
My first knee-jerk reaction was to deny her bond. I find her a continued danger to the children.
There's no telling just how long it's going to take for crews to clean up the deplorable conditions the kids were living in. We saw several people doing the job today in hazmat suits.
It's just terrible. It's no words. There's no words that I could say for something like this, a condition like this. There's no words I could say.
Prior to the bond amount being named, Bryant's court-appointed attorney tried her best to argue that her client was not a flight risk or a danger to the public.
She's a lifelong resident of the county,
She was residing within the city limits of this community.
While Bryant looked off screen for most of the conversation, ultimately it was decided by the judge the main reason for the high bond amount was the chance of Bryant physically getting into contact with the kids while they're with relatives.
I'm concerned that she still may have contact with the family member from the jail with instructions to continue to engage in fear tactics to forbid the children from cooperating with authorities in their continued investigation in this matter.
Now, if Bryant is somehow able to come up with that $250 million bond, she's going to be ordered to wear a tether. She's also not supposed to have any type of contact with those kids at all, let alone any minor. But the cleanup still continues at that home, and we'll have more on what that process is like coming up at 6 p.m. Live in Pontiac, Victor Williams, Local 4.
The more we hear, the more shocked we continue to be. Victor, thank you. And scan the QR code at the bottom of your screen right here. That will take you to the story on clickondetroit.com. It breaks down the charges and looks into why the judge thinks Bryant is such a flight risk. You can also find the link on the homepage.
News from Pontiac, where a mother accused of abandoning her 3 kids for nearly 5 years has pleaded not guilty. Thank you for joining us at noon. I'm Allie Hoxie. In the last half hour, Kelly Bryant pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of first-degree child abuse. As far as bond, the judge said that she finds Bryant to be, quote, a continued danger to the children, setting her bond at $250 million cash. If she does post that bond, she will be prohibited from contacting her children. Bryant is due back in court next month. Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald says the children suffered unimaginable abuse, stating that the children were living in squalor. Yesterday, employees from the Oakland County Sheriff's Office wore hazmat suits to clean out the house. This case has left so many people in disbelief.
Everybody's upset about it, like, oh my God, this is right in our neighborhood. How could something like this happen?
Now, that is a question that we have heard from so many people over the last few days. 7 News Detroit reporter Kiara Hay is in Pontiac breaking down the details of this case and what comes next.
You know, this is one of those stories that's going to stick with me for a really long time. In my head, I keep replaying the Oakland County Sheriff Michael Bouchard saying that the 15-year-old boy had to escape the home because he wanted to feel the grass. His mother telling him and his 2 other sisters that they could never leave the home and never answer the door. Well, now we're learning that the mother is the one who could have her freedom stripped away for the rest of her life. Kelly Marie Bryant is now charged with 3 counts of first-degree child abuse for allegedly abandoning her 3 children, aged 15, 13, and 12, for nearly 5 years. With no running water in the home, piles of trash, feces, and mold were present wall to wall, with officials wearing hazmat suits to clean it out. Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald saying the children struggled to brush their teeth and flush the toilet at the hospital because they hadn't done it in so long. Well, now we're learning how Bryant will plead to the charges brought against her, but McDonald warns more people could be next.
Morally, there is plenty of responsibility to go around for how this was allowed to happen. However, these 3 kids were entrusted to the care of their mother, Kelly Bryant, and the evidence suggests that she effectively abandoned them to a revolting pit of refuse and squalor.
Now, this is just the first court trial and many to come in this horrifying story. Of course, 7 News Detroit will continue to follow it all the way through. In Pontiac, I'm Kiara Hay, 7 News Detroit.
So what do y'all think about that? This woman needs to be, the judge already said it, and it's a $250 million cash bond. There ain't no damn way she gonna be able to pay for that, but it's just sad. So you telling me those kids at the time when they first, when you look at it, they're 15, 13, and 12, and you're talking about for the last 4 years, they really stopped learning. They were back in the 5th, the 5th, 6th, and the 8th grade. It's just, it's sad. Like, they never learned nothing. They didn't learn proper hygiene. On that time, you got to get on kids. They're basically surviving, living for themselves the last 4 years in a house. And she don't see nothing wrong with that. 34-year-old woman. She need her ass kicked. So y'all tell me what y'all think about that, man. I mean, this is crazy. Like, and make sure y'all check out my last video too, because that was pretty sad, man. The fact that that 3-year-old kid, man, lost his life. But yeah, I'm just bringing awareness, man. We got to do better. Like they said, if you knew better, you do better. So y'all tell me what y'all think and what's going to turn out with this. Is this woman going to end up, because they said she might end up getting life. And what do y'all feel about that? Peace.
Tell me, is it facts or opinions? You be the judge.
You'll have to decide. You'll have to decide. You'll have to decide.